Hi, I'm Lisa Morgan. I'm 32 and I've always been the responsible older sister to Rebecca. Growing up, we were inseparable, sharing secrets and dreams. So when she got engaged, I couldn't have been happier to be her maid of honor. I put everything I had into planning her perfect day, thousands of dollars, countless hours, and all my heart. But then family dynamics came into play, and things began to spiral in ways I never imagined. Especially with my mother, Deborah, taking the reins. If you're watching and dealing with family drama, drop a comment below. Also, hit like and subscribe because this story might give you the strength you need. Growing up as Rebecca's older sister, I often played the role of her protector. I taught her to tie her shoes, helped her navigate high school drama, and was the constant person she could rely on. It was no secret that our mother favored Rebecca. She was the golden child with artistic talents and a bubbly personality, while I was the practical one, always the serious, responsible one. Mom constantly reminded me that I needed to lighten up. My dad, Thomas, was mostly a quiet figure in our family. He preferred to avoid conflict, especially when Mom's behavior crossed the line. That left me to be the family's problem solver. When the roof leaked, I fixed it. When bills piled up, I quietly paid them with my savings. As we grew older, that role continued. I even supported Rebecca through her art history degree when our parents couldn't. My own career as a financial consultant in Boston had me managing multi-million-dollar portfolios. Still, the irony wasn't lost on me. While I was managing other people's finances, I was also expected to handle my family's. I didn't mind. Helping Rebecca chase her dreams always gave me joy. When Rebecca met James Wilson at an art gallery, opening 3 years ago, I knew they were perfect for each other. James came from a wealthy family but wasn't flashy about it. He supported Rebecca's career and valued her artistic vision. So, when they got engaged after 2 years of dating, it didn't surprise anyone. I was the first person Rebecca called. Absolutely ecstatic. "Lisa," he proposed. "You're going to be my maid of honor, right? I can't do this without you." Her excitement made my heart swell. Of course, I promised I'd help, and mentally, I started planning how I could make her wedding. Dreams come true. The early stages of planning were just as I'd imagined. Rebecca and I spent weekends browsing venues, picking out color schemes, and making Pinterest boards. I took meticulous notes during every conversation, wanting to make sure every detail reflected her vision. My apartment started to look like a bridal magazine headquarters with fabric swatches, mood boards, and wedding ideas scattered everywhere. Then came the first sign of trouble. It was supposed to be a routine family dinner to discuss the wedding budget, but when Mom arrived, she had a leather-bound wedding planner I had never seen before. "I've already put deposits down for the Clayton Hotel," she announced, barely letting anyone take a bite of their salad. They only had one available date this summer, so I grabbed it. Rebecca was surprised but pleased. "Mom, that's so generous." But Lisa and I were still comparing venues. Mom waved it off, saying, "The Clayton book's up a year in advance. We're lucky they had a cancellation." She shot me a victorious glance. "I've always imagined your wedding there." That was the first of many decisions made without consulting. Emmy, within weeks, Mom had taken over, becoming a full-fledged wedding dictator. The vendors I'd researched were replaced by Mom's friends' recommendations. The color scheme Rebecca and I had decided on was suddenly too dull. "It's fine," Rebecca assured me when I expressed concern. "Mom's really enjoying this and it makes planning easier. Plus, she and Dad are contributing a lot financially." I stepped back, still helping when I could, but increasingly feeling like an outsider. That feeling grew when my cousin Megan started showing up at planning events that I was never invited to. Megan had always hovered around our family, trying to get close, but now she was appearing in wedding photos, picking out color swatches, and attending vendor meetings. One photo on Instagram even showed her holding up potential bridesmaid dresses, a task I thought would be mine as maid of honor. I mentioned it to my boyfriend, Tyler, one evening while scrolling through Instagram. "Rebecca seems closer to Megan these days." Maybe it's because Megan has more free time, Tyler said, always the voice of reason. You've been really busy at work. I nodded, but couldn't shake the feeling that something more was happening. After all, Rebecca and I had been constants in each other's lives for 30 years. Could a few months of wedding planning really change that? As the wedding planning continued, things only got worse. Over the next few weeks, invitations to family events stopped coming. When I reached out to Rebecca, her responses became increasingly brief and rushed. Gone were the long talks about centerpieces, music choices, and what her dress would look like. Instead, all I got were texts saying, "Mom's handling it," or "It's already figured out." Meanwhile, I was still contributing financially to the wedding paying for the photographer Rebecca loved, but Mom didn't think was worth the price. Buying custom welcome baskets for out-of-town guests and secretly arranging a luxury honeymoon. To Bali, complete with first-class flights and a private villa with ocean views, I told myself that everything would go back to normal after the wedding. This was just a stressful time, and soon Rebecca and I would laugh about it over wine in her new married apartment. But I had no idea how wrong I was. The day I found out I wasn't invited to dress shopping was when I finally realized things had gone too far. I was having coffee with my coworker Natalie, who mentioned that Rebecca had found her wedding dress the day before. How was the appointment? Sandra said Rebecca found the one right away. Natalie asked. Excited for me, my stomach dropped. What appointment? I froze. Coffee cup halfway to my lips. Natalie seemed confused. Oh, Sandra said you were there with Rebecca, your mom, and Megan. You weren't there? I tried to stay calm, muttering that I'd had a last-minute work emergency. When I excused myself to the bathroom, I stood in front of a mirror trying to process what had just happened. My mind raced. How had I been excluded from this major moment? That night, I called Rebecca, my voice carefully controlled. How was dress shopping? I asked. Rebecca hesitated before answering. It happened pretty fast. Mom had an appointment, but it wasn't supposed to be the actual shopping day. It was just a quick look with Megan. She was free, and we needed a third opinion. I didn't hide the hurt in my voice. I could have made myself free. You could have asked me. Rebecca didn't seem to grasp the gravity of the situation. Lisa, don't make this a big deal. There will be plenty of other wedding stuff you can be a part of, but other wedding stuff never came. The bridal shower was planned without my input, though I was still asked to contribute financially to the venue. Megan took over the bachelorette party planning, picking a destination Rebecca wouldn't truly enjoy. When I suggested alternatives based on what I knew Rebecca would love, my ideas were dismissed as not what Rebecca wants anymore. Still, I remained in the background, supporting what I could. I even finalized the honeymoon, spending $8,600 on first-class flights, luxury accommodations, and exclusive experiences. I imagined Rebecca's face when I surprised her with this at the rehearsal dinner. I thought it would bring us closer, remind her of the bond we'd always shared, but instead, the distance grew. Rebecca began skipping our traditional Sunday brunches. When we did talk, it felt like we were going through the motions, nothing like the deep, meaningful conversations we used to have. Finally, after 3 weeks of sporadic communication, I called her directly. Is everything okay between us? She avoided my eyes. Everything's fine. I'm just really busy with wedding stuff. Mom's been amazing at handling all the details. At a family gathering in May, just 2 months before the wedding, I overheard something that made my blood run cold. I had walked into the kitchen to refill my water when I heard my mom's voice from the other room. Lisa's always been difficult, she said clearly, thinking I couldn't hear. Rebecca's finally seeing it now. She always has to control everything, make everything about herself. My heart sank. I stood frozen, water overflowing from my glass. As the conversation continued, Megan added, It must be hard for Rebecca, especially during her wedding, when she should be the center of attention. Exactly, Mom agreed. That's why we've had to minimize her involvement for Rebecca's sake. The reality hit me like a slap. My own mother was actively working to exclude me from my sister's wedding. She was painting me as an attention-seeking monster to anyone who would listen. That night, I broke down in front of Tyler, finally sharing the fears I'd been hiding for months. What if they don't even want me at the wedding anymore? What if all this distance is leading to something worse? Tyler held me close, his calm presence grounding me as my hand shook. "That's not possible," he said firmly. "You're Rebecca's sister. You've done nothing but support her." I shook my head. What if Mom's convinced her otherwise? You don't know how persuasive she can be. How she twists everything. Tyler was quiet for a moment, then said, "You need to talk to Rebecca. No more guessing. No more hoping it'll get better on its own. You need to have a real conversation about what's going on." He was right. The situation had gone too far for me to stay passive. It was time to confront Rebecca directly. The next morning, I texted Rebecca. "We need to talk about the wedding and our relationship. Can we meet tomorrow?" Hours later, I received her response. "Really busy with wedding stuff. Come to Mom and Dad's on Thursday at 7 o'clock. We can talk then." Those 5 days felt like an eternity. I rehearsed everything I wanted to say in my mind, trying to prepare myself for the conversation. I knew I had to stay calm, express my hurt without sounding accusatory, and remember that Rebecca might be caught in the middle. Mom's strong personality could have pressured her into this. Thursday evening arrived, and I drove to my parents' house, my heart full of hope for reconciliation. But I had no idea that I was walking into an ambush that would shatter everything I thought I knew about my family. When I arrived, the house felt strangely still. The familiar driveway where Becca and I used to play hopscotch suddenly seemed foreign. I took a deep breath before heading up to the door. Mom answered immediately, her expression unreadable. "We're in the living room," she said curtly. Turning without waiting for me to respond, inside, the atmosphere was tense. Dad sat in his usual armchair, looking uncomfortable. Rebecca perched on the edge of the sofa, her eyes downcast, fingers nervously twisting in her lap. Mom stood behind her, one hand resting on the back of the sofa, like she was protecting her. And sitting where I usually would during family discussions was Megan, looking both smug and concerned. I stood there, waiting for someone to speak. "What's going on?" I finally asked, my voice a little shaky. Rebecca, who had remained silent up until then, looked like she was about to say something, but Mom cut her off. "There's something you need to understand about the wedding," she said, her tone patronizing. A strange, unsettling silence filled the room. I could feel the storm that was coming. Mom continued, her words deliberate. "We've been discussing things, and we all agreed that your involvement in the wedding has become problematic." "Problematic?" I repeated, my mind racing. "What are you talking about?" Mom's voice grew sharper. "Your controlling behavior. Your need to make everything about yourself. The way you've tried to overshadow Rebecca's special time with your opinions and your financial contributions." I stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. This wasn't the woman who'd raised me. This wasn't my mother. I turned to Rebecca, desperate for her to speak for herself. "Rebecca?" I asked, my voice cracking. Rebecca finally looked up, her expression a mixture of guilt and resignation. "It's just been really stressful, Lisa. Every time you get involved, it creates tension. Mom thinks. I interrupted. "What do you think, Rebecca?" Before she could respond, Mom stepped forward, positioning herself between us. "What Rebecca thinks," she said with a pointed look, "is that her wedding should be a happy occasion. And frankly, your presence would make that impossible." The room seemed to tilt as her words sank in. "You mean my presence?" I echoed, my voice barely above a whisper. Mom's lips curled into a smirk. We all agreed. "You're not welcome at the wedding," she said, clearly savoring the moment, her words deliberate and cold. "Not as maid of honor, not as a bridesmaid, not even as a guest. It's better for everyone this way." I froze. The silence that followed was deafening. The sound of the antique clock ticking on the mantel seemed to stretch on forever. Dad shifted in his chair but didn't say anything. Megan, who had been sitting quietly, didn't look at me. And Rebecca, my sister, my best friend, sat there in silent compliance. I managed to find my voice, even though it felt steady despite the shock. "I see," I said slowly, the hurt already settling deep in my chest. "And when was this decision made?" Mom was clearly pleased by my calm reaction, perhaps mistaking it for acceptance. "We've been moving in this direction for months," she said. "Clearly, it's time to make it official." Rebecca asked Megan to be her maid of honor weeks ago. I turned to Megan, who now looked me in the eye with a challenging expression. "Congratulations," I said flatly, my tone sharp but controlled. Megan tried to shrug it off. "It's nothing personal," she said, the lie in her voice unmistakable. I almost laughed at how absurd it all was. "Nothing personal?" I muttered under my breath. This wasn't just a wedding. This was my entire relationship with my sister being ripped apart. I turned back to Rebecca, my voice softer now. "Is this really what you want?" Before she could answer, Mom jumped in once again, her tone accusatory. "What Rebecca wants is a drama-free wedding. You've always been too controlling, too opinionated. Everything has to be your way. The venue wasn't good enough. The caterer wasn't up to your standards. I couldn't take it anymore." "That's not true," I interrupted, the anger finally breaking through my composed exterior. "I've supported every decision, even when I wasn't consulted. I've contributed thousands of dollars without being asked." Mom pointed a finger at, her voice seething with contempt. "See? There it is again, throwing your money in our faces. Using your financial contributions to control the wedding. That's exactly why you can't be there." I turned to my father, silently pleading with him to say something, anything. He met my gaze briefly, but then looked away, his lifelong pattern of avoiding conflict winning out, just as it always had. And in that moment, I understood. This wasn't just about a wedding. This was about years of manipulation, of silence, of my worth being defined by what I could provide for everyone else. "Good to know," I said, my voice a little too steady. I stood up and walked toward the door, my steps slow and deliberate. Behind me, I heard Rebecca's voice, soft and uncertain, calling my name, but no one followed. No one tried to stop me. The drive home felt like a blur. The road seemed to twist and blur beneath my tires as tears filled my eyes. I pulled over twice, unable to see clearly, before finally making it to my apartment. Tyler was waiting for me, his face filled with hopeful expectation that shattered the moment he saw me walk through the door. "What happened?" he asked immediately, pulling me into a tight hug. The floodgates opened. The story poured out in broken pieces as I sobbed uncontrollably. The ambush, Mom's cruel smirk, Rebecca's betrayal, Dad's silence, Megan's triumph. The words were jumbled, but Tyler held me the whole time, not saying a word, just letting me release everything. "They can't do this," Tyler said, his voice rising with outrage as I finished. "You're her sister. You've done nothing but support her." I wiped my face, feeling emotionally drained. "Apparently that doesn't matter," I whispered, the exhaustion setting in. "Mom's been working on this for months, turning Rebecca against me and making me out to be this villain. What are you going to do?" Tyler asked, his hand warm and comforting on mine. I stared at the city lights outside my window, feeling strangely hollow yet lighter at the same time. The worst had happened. The truth was out, and now it was time to rebuild. "I don't know yet," I admitted, "but I know I deserve better than this. All of it. I had no idea then how much more was coming." The confrontation at my parents' house was just the beginning. What followed would force me to reevaluate everything: my relationship with my family, my own boundaries, and the person I had allowed myself to become in the name of love and loyalty. The next morning, my phone buzzed with texts, calls, and missed messages. My mom's texts ranged from defensive accusations, Like, you're making this all about you again. To guilt trips, like, after everything we've done for you. I couldn't bring myself to read them. They felt hollow, like the manipulation I'd been seeing for years. But one message stood out. It was from Rebecca, sent at 3:42 a.m. And for the first time in weeks, it made my heart ache with hope. I'm so sorry, Lisa. Mom's been lying to me about you for months. James and I just found out what she did with the honeymoon reservations. Please call me. I need my sister back. I stared at the message for what felt like an eternity, my thumb hovering over the call button. After everything, could I trust her? Could I really open myself up to more manipulation? Or was this a genuine attempt to repair what had been broken? But other messages from Mom painted a very different picture. She was angry and threatening. If you don't apologize, I'll tell everyone about your behavior, and then trying to soften the tone with, we can still fix this if you apologize. Dad's message was brief and subdued. Your mother is very upset, he said, his voice barely audible through the phone. I didn't know about any of this until yesterday. Please call when you can. I wasn't sure what to make of Dad. I had always been the one to keep the peace in our family, and now I wasn't sure if he was on my side or if he was just trying to avoid conflict. Like he always did, I couldn't ignore it any longer. I needed to know the truth. I made the decision to reach out to my Aunt Catherine, who had been a rare but reliable voice of support in the family. She left me a voicemail, her tone filled with warmth and concern. Oh, Lisa, I've been so worried. Are you all right? She asked, her voice low. I answered, my own voice shaking. Not really. I don't understand what's happening, Aunt Kath. Why is Mom doing this? Aunt Catherine sighed, as if she'd been waiting for me to ask that very question. Because you threaten her, sweetie. You always have. Since you were little. You're capable, independent, and strong. Deborah needs to be needed. She has to control everything. And when that's challenged, she reacts by turning people against each other. My mind reeled at her words. My mother had been doing this for years, subtly undermining me, even when I didn't realize it. It wasn't just about the wedding. It was about a pattern of control that went back decades. Aunt Catherine continued, her voice softening. I'm not saying this to make you feel worse, Lisa, but you need to see it for what it is. Your mom's been manipulating everyone around her, and that includes Rebecca. The only way to stop it is to stop accepting it. Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. I'd been so blinded by my desire to please my mother, to make things right, that I hadn't realized I was enabling the very behavior that had been hurting me all along. Thanks, Aunt Kath, I said softly, my heart heavy with the weight of everything she'd revealed. Later that afternoon, I called my best friend, Andrea, who worked as a therapist. I needed to understand what was happening on a deeper level, how I'd allowed myself to be trapped in this toxic cycle. Without breaking confidentiality, Andrea helped me put the pieces together. Lisa, she said gently, your mother is using classic narcissistic patterns. She's triangulating, pitting people against each other to maintain control. And Rebecca, unfortunately, has been caught in the middle. She's been manipulated too. Hearing Andrea's words felt like a light bulb went off in my head. I wasn't crazy. This wasn't just about a wedding or a family misunderstanding. This was calculated. Emotional manipulation. And I had to protect myself. The next shock came when James, Rebecca's fiancé, called me. I didn't expect to hear from him, but his voice was tense with urgency. Lisa, thank God you answered, he said. It's been chaos here. Rebecca's been crying for hours. What happened? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. James, he said, taking a deep breath. We found out what your mom's been doing. The lies she's been telling, the emails she's altered. Lisa, Rebecca never knew you were excluded from dress shopping. Your mom told her you couldn't make it, showed her texts from you saying you were too busy or didn't care about wedding activities. I couldn't believe it. But I never sent those texts, I said, my voice shaking. I never told her that. We know now, James confirmed. When we confronted your mom, she admitted. to changing the names in the contact list on Rebecca's phone. She'd been intercepting your messages, pretending to be you. My mind was spinning. Why would she do that? I whispered, trying to process the full extent of the deception. James's voice hardened. It was all about control. When we started checking her phone records, we found inconsistencies in the text. She'd even created fake conversations to make it look like you were rejecting Rebecca's wedding and getting upset about the plans. I couldn't wrap my head around it. How did you figure it out? The honeymoon cancellation was the tipping point, James said. When Rebecca got the notification, she was confused because she didn't even know about the Bali trip. Your mom claimed you promised this big honeymoon, but canceled it after being excluded from the wedding. But why would I do that? I asked, confused. That doesn't make any sense. Why would I spend all that money on a honeymoon if I was as resentful as Mom claimed? Rebecca, who had been quiet on the other side of the line, chimed in. We started investigating. We checked the timestamps of your messages, compared them with what Mom had shown me. Everything started to unravel. We even found a folder on her tablet. She'd been saving screenshots of the fake conversations to keep track of her lies. My heart sank. The methodical nature of the lies hit me like a punch to the gut. I gathered myself and pushed my folder of evidence across the table. The one I had prepared for when I would confront my family. I brought my own evidence, I said quietly. Bank statements showing my contributions, emails I sent to vendors, everything. As Rebecca and James sifted through the documents, their faces shifted. From shock to horror to a quiet fury. It was clear now my mother had orchestrated all of this. James spoke again, his voice full of regret. That night at your parents' house, Rebecca thought we were meeting to clear things up, but she didn't know Mom had already decided to cut you out of everything. I turned to Rebecca, my voice breaking. You didn't know? She looked down, ashamed. No, Lisa, when Mom started saying those things about you, about how you were trying to ruin the wedding, I couldn't believe it at first. By the time I realized what was happening, you were already gone. Her words were like a weight lifting from my chest, but the damage was done. We had lost so much time, and now I had to figure out what came next. Rebecca reached across the table, her hand trembling as she grabbed mine. I never wanted to exclude you. You're my sister, Lisa. You've always been there for me. I need you to know that. The relief that washed over me was immediate, but it didn't fix everything. It couldn't undo the months of manipulation, the lies, or the isolation I had felt, but it was a start. We need to talk about Mom, I said once I could find my voice. Again, this isn't normal behavior. This is deliberate manipulation. She's been doing this for years. James's expression darkened. It gets worse, Lisa. After you left the house that night, Rebecca confronted your mom. And the things she said, ... It was like watching a completely different person. Rebecca nodded, looking defeated. She admitted everything. But she didn't apologize. She said she was protecting me from your negative influence when I told her I wanted you back in the wedding. She threatened to pull all her financial support and tell the whole family I was having a pre-wedding breakdown, just like what she's been saying about you. I shook my head. This is unbelievable, James agreed. It's a pattern she's used to discredit anyone who challenges her. The truth doesn't matter to her. She twisted to fit her narrative. As the afternoon wore on, we continued to piece together the full extent of the manipulation. The altered texts, the diverted invitations, the rumors she spread throughout. Our social circle, every revelation, added a new layer to the picture of emotional abuse. Finally, I spoke up. I've arranged a meeting with Dad, Aunt Catherine, and some other family members who need to hear the truth. We have to stop this cycle. Rebecca nodded without hesitation. I'll be there. It's time everyone knows what's really been going on. The family meeting was scheduled for the following evening, and I knew it would be difficult. But it was necessary. For my peace, for my relationship with Rebecca, and for the truth to finally come out. The family meeting the next evening. was both difficult and necessary. We gathered in Aunt Catherine's living room, myself, Rebecca, James, Dad, Aunt Catherine, Uncle Paul, and our maternal grandmother, Martha. Mom wasn't there yet, but I knew she'd be arriving soon. I had already made my decision. I would. Present the truth, no more holding back. This wasn't about airing dirty laundry. This was about ending the manipulation and finally getting the truth into the open. I laid the evidence out in front of everyone, methodically and without emotion. The fake texts, the financial records, witness accounts of Mom's behavior, and everything that had led to this point. Aunt Catherine spoke up next, sharing her own experiences of Mom's manipulation from years ago. She talked about how Deborah had done the same thing to her when Aunt Catherine had been close to Dad, using lies to create distance between family. Members James followed suit, detailing the way Mom had reacted when they confronted her at their apartment. He spoke about the meltdown she'd had, her refusal to acknowledge the harm she'd done, and how she turned everything into a game of control. Dad sat through most of the presentation in silence, his face growing increasingly gray as he absorbed the evidence. It was clear that this wasn't easy for him. He had spent his life avoiding conflict, and now he was being forced to face the harsh truths about his wife's behavior. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible, heavy, with regret. "I knew some of it," he admitted, his eyes downcast. "Not the full extent, but enough that I should have done something long ago. I've always chosen peace over protecting you both. I'm sorry, Lisa, I should have done better." Hearing that from Dad, the one who had always kept his distance from Mom's actions, hit me harder than I expected. He had been complicit by choosing to stay quiet, by not stepping in when things had gotten out of hand. But what happened next was something I never could have predicted. Mom arrived last, just as we had all anticipated. She had been told this was a meeting to discuss the wedding budget, but when she stepped into the room, the sight of everyone gathered around the coffee table with the evidence spread out before her caused her to freeze. "What is this?" she demanded, her eyes darting from face to face. She looked at each of us, trying to gauge our reaction, but there was no turning back. "A chance for truth," I said quietly, my heart pounding as I finally addressed her directly. At first, Mom denied everything. She accused us of conspiring against her. She claimed we were all making things up and trying to turn the family against her. She tried to manipulate the situation the way she always did, but this time it didn't work. When her usual tactics of guilt-tripping and denying truth didn't get her the reaction she wanted, she turned cold and angry. "I've done everything for this family," she snapped. "After everything I've done for you all, this is how I'm treated?" I wasn't going to back down. "It's not about what you've done for us, Mom. It's about the way you've manipulated us all for years. This ends now." For a moment, the room was still. The air was thick with tension, and I could feel everyone's eyes on me, waiting for what would happen next. And then Rebecca stood up, her face set with a quiet determination I hadn't seen before. "Lisa will be my maid of honor, as I've always wanted. And if you can't accept that, if you can't treat her with respect, then you will have a severely limited role in this wedding and in our lives going forward." Mom's eyes widened in shock. She was used to controlling everything, to bending people to her will, but not this time. "You would choose her over your own mother?" she asked, her voice rising in disbelief. "I'm choosing truth over manipulation," Rebecca replied firmly. "I'm choosing health over toxicity. I'm not letting you destroy my relationship with Lisa any longer." For the first time, I saw my father stand up for what was right. He looked at Mom, his voice steady but filled with a quiet authority. "Enough, Deborah. Look at the evidence. Look at what you've done. This stops now." Mom's face twisted with anger. She tried to argue, to plead, but she was cornered. The truth was finally out, and for once, she couldn't talk her way out of it. When the meeting ended, Mom stormed out of the house, promising to retaliate, but something fundamental had shifted. The pattern of manipulation had been exposed for. "All to see," It wasn't over, not by a long shot, but for the first time, I felt like we were all on the same page except for Mom, who was still trying to play the victim. The weeks that followed were tense but necessary. Mom cycled through various tactics: icy silence, tearful pleas for understanding, rage-filled outbursts, but it didn't matter anymore. She could no longer control me. I had finally found the strength to stand up for myself and demand the respect I deserved. Even Dad surprised me. After years of choosing peace over confrontation, he found the courage to support Rebecca's decision to reinstate me as maid of honor. He admitted that he had failed us, that he had let things go too far. "I should have protected you both long ago," he said quietly during a private conversation. As the wedding day approached, things settled into a fragile new normal. After the intervention, Mom tried to accept the new boundaries, though it was clear she wasn't happy about it. Her interactions with me remained minimal and outwardly polite, but I could feel the tension between us every time we spoke. She focused on playing the role of the mother of the bride as perfectly as she could, but I could tell the effort was draining her. Rebecca and I, on the other hand, started rebuilding our relationship. It wasn't easy, but we worked through the pain and the betrayal day by day. We spent hours talking about everything: the things Mom had said, how the lies had torn us apart, how we had both been manipulated. During one of our brunches, Rebecca said, "I keep thinking about what would have happened if James hadn't discovered those fake texts." I squeezed her hand across the table. "Let's not think about that," I said softly. "We're here now. We're fixing this." In the meantime, I was finally starting to value myself apart from what I could give to others. I had always put everyone's needs above my own, but I was learning that self-respect and boundaries were essential, even with family. I had made a commitment to not let myself be manipulated again. As for Mom, her compliance seemed more strategic than genuine. She didn't argue when Rebecca reinstated me as maid of honor, but I could see the resentment in her eyes. Still, I refused to let her get to me. It wasn't about her anymore. It was about me standing my ground and not allowing myself to be pushed around. The wedding day finally arrived. Bright and sunny, an unexpected contrast to the emotional storms of the past few months. The ceremony was scheduled for 4 p.m. at the Clayton Hotel, leaving the morning and early afternoon for final preparations. Mama had promised to behave, and though I could tell it was a strain for her, she kept her word. Rebecca and I had a quiet moment alone as I helped her into her wedding dress, the one I hadn't been present for when she chose it. I felt a pang of sadness for the moments we had lost, but I pushed it aside. This was about the now, about the present and the future. Rebecca caught the look on my face in the mirror. "I wish we could erase the last few months," she said softly. Surprised myself by responding, "I don't." As painful as it was, it brought truth to the surface. Now we can build something healthier, something better. Rebecca smiled, her face glowing as she turned to face me. "When did my big sister get so wise?" "Probably around the time my little sister got so brave," I replied, adjusting her veil. The smile that spread across her face made everything worth it. The ceremony went smoothly, and I stood proudly beside Rebecca as she exchanged vows with James, holding her bouquet as tears filled my eyes. I had always imagined being a part of her wedding, but I never dreamed it would be like this. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. It was us, our love and our bond rebuilt. During the reception, an unexpected moment of healing happened. I was adjusting the displaced cards near the gift table when I heard Mom's voice behind me. "The calligraphy is beautiful," she said, sounding almost unsure. "That was your doing, wasn't it?" I turned, bracing myself for criticism disguised as a compliment, but when I looked at her, I saw something I hadn't expected: genuine appreciation. "Yes," I answered simply. Rebecca had mentioned that she loved hand lettering, and I'd made sure that detail was perfect. Mom looked at me, and for the first time in a long while, she seemed to soften. She cleared her throat, avoiding my gaze. "You've always noticed those details about people, what they love, what matters to them. I never had that gift." The admission, though small, was significant. It wasn't an apology, but it was a crack in the fortress of denial she had built around herself. For today, that was enough. A humorless laugh escaped her as she continued, "Apparently, I have work to do in that area." She hesitated, then added, "You're seeing a therapist?" Her surprise was evident. "Your father insisted after everything." She trailed off, her voice softer now, vulnerable in a way I had never heard before. "I don't expect this to fix things between us. I know it will take time if it's even possible, but I'm trying." It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a transformation. But it was a crack, a tiny step towards something I hadn't thought possible. Growth. A month after the wedding, our family began tentative group therapy sessions. Mom attended reluctantly at first, but with increasing willingness as the framework gave her acceptable ways to express her needs without resorting to manipulation. Dad began to find his voice, speaking truths long suppressed. I even saw a shift in him. His newfound confidence gave him the strength to finally stand up to Mom and apologize for his silence. Rebecca and I grew closer, our sisterhood stronger than ever, built on mutual respect instead of the codependent patterns that had once defined our relationship. As for me, my own healing journey continued. I established clearer boundaries in all my relationships, not just with family, but with everyone. I had learned to recognize when my need to help crossed into unhealthy territory. I had also learned that my worth wasn't defined by what I could do for others. Tyler had been my rock throughout the entire ordeal. His unwavering support gave me the courage to find my voice, to demand the respect I deserved. 6 months after Rebecca's wedding, while hiking on our favorite mountain overlook, Tyler turned to me with a mischievous grin. "To our favorite mountain overlook," he said, lifting his water bottle. I smiled, the weight of everything we had been through finally lifting. "Yes," I replied without hesitation, "but there's one condition." He raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What's that?" "Our wedding planning stays between us. Small committee, clear boundaries, no drama." Tyler laughed, his voice echoing through the valley. Deal. Life continued to evolve in the months and years that followed. Mom's progress came in fits and starts, some days showing real growth, others slipping back into old patterns. It was a difficult road, but one that ultimately brought us closer to the version of family we had always needed. Even if it wasn't perfect, Dad's transformation was particularly striking. For the first time in my life, he started to make decisions based on what was best for us, not just what kept the peace. He became more involved in the family's emotional well-being and in protecting his relationship with Rebecca and me. Rebecca and James welcomed their first child not long after, making me an aunt to a little girl whose middle name, Lisa, brought tears to my eyes. Holding her for the first time, I realized just how far we had come. The old family patterns manipulation. Silence, enabling could still be lurking in the background, but they no longer defined us. We were rewriting the narrative together. I also realized that healing wasn't a straight line. There were days when the wounds felt fresh again, but there were more days where the scars were a reminder of how much we had overcome. I had learned to forgive, not to forget, but to create space for new, healthier dynamics in our relationships. I wasn't going to let my past define my future. Tyler and I grew even closer, as we always did. He had been the constant in my life, my steady rock, throughout the entire ordeal. He never wavered in his support for me, and together we had begun planning our own future. But this time, we had a mutual understanding of the boundaries that kept us grounded, keeping the drama at bay. "To our favorite mountain overlook," Tyler said again during one of our hikes, this time under the golden glow of the setting sun. He handed me the water bottle just like that first time. I grinned, taking it from him. "Yes, but the same condition applies." I nudged him playfully. He raised an eyebrow, grinning back. "Of course, no drama, just us." As the months went on, our lives continued to unfold with new adventures. Tyler and I began planning our wedding, but this time it would be different. No one would try to control the process. and no one would manipulate us into decisions we didn't want. It would be hours, fully and completely in the years since that chaotic wedding planning and family drama. I had learned the most important lessons. First, that boundaries weren't barriers to love, but foundations for it. Without boundaries, there was no real respect, no genuine connection. I'd also learned that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or letting people off the hook. It means freeing yourself from the weight of resentment and pain. Standing firm in my own worth became the most powerful tool I had. I had spent years measuring my value by what I could give others, but in the end, I realized that my value wasn't dependent on my ability to fix things or sacrifice myself for others. It was inherent. I was worthy of love, respect, and healthy relationships just as I was. And once I learned to value myself, I was able to form more authentic, balanced relationships with the people who truly mattered. 6 months after Rebecca's wedding, as I was sitting in the car with Tyler on our way to our favorite mountain overlook, I realized that the best decision I had ever made was to stand up for myself, to stand firm in my boundaries, my worth, and my truth. The years of manipulation, the heartache, the family drama, they didn't define me anymore. They were part of my past, but they didn't control my future. Tyler turned to me with that familiar grin. "What do you think?" he asked, his voice filled with warmth. I looked at him, smiling. As I reflected on everything we had been through, the growth we both experienced, "I think we've got this. We've learned the hard way, but we've learned," I said, taking his hand. Tyler smiled back, his eyes filled with pride. "We have," he agreed. Our lives were no longer defined by toxic family dynamics, by manipulation, or by the need to please others. We had built something healthy, something solid. And as we stood at that overlook, the future seemed full of promise. The drama of the past finally behind us. As the years went by, our family dynamic continued to evolve. Mom's progress remained slow and inconsistent, but it was progress nonetheless. There were still moments where old patterns would resurface, but we had learned to manage them. For the first time, we were building relationships based on honesty and mutual respect, not manipulation or fear. Dad continued to surprise me, stepping into a more active role in the family, finally acknowledging the years of silence and inaction. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough to make me hopeful. I saw the strength in him that I'd never noticed before, the courage to face his mistakes and move forward. Rebecca and I, too, began to heal the distance that had grown between us. We spent hours talking, making up for lost time. There were still occasional moments of tension, moments where old wounds would reopen, but we always worked through them together. Our bond, though scarred, was stronger than ever. We learned that love wasn't about being perfect. It was about showing up for each other. Even when things got hard, Rebecca and James welcomed their second child a couple of years later, and I became an aunt again. Holding my niece and nephew was a reminder of how far we had come, not just as a family, but as individuals. We were no longer defined by our past, but by the choices we made to move forward. I could look at my niece and see a future without the patterns of manipulation that had once shaped our lives. I could see the possibility for them to grow up in a family where love, trust, and boundaries were the foundation, not control. I had learned something invaluable through all of this. The truth, no matter how painful, always has a way of surfacing. It might take years, it might break you in the process, but eventually it will free you. I had spent so much of my life trying to protect my family, trying to keep the peace, but in doing so, I had lost sight of myself. It took confronting the harsh truths, confronting my own fears and doubts, to finally find my voice. Tyler and I had our own wedding a few years later, and it was everything I had always dreamed of without the stress, without the drama. We made our own decisions, surrounded by the people who truly loved us and supported us. It was a celebration of love and the life we were building together, a life free from manipulation and toxic dynamics. Mom attended the wedding, but her role was minimal. She was still part of the family, but things had shifted. She no longer had the same power over me, and that was the greatest gift I could give myself. The truth had set me free, and I was no longer willing to let anyone control my happiness. As I stood there on my wedding day, looking at Tyler, I felt a sense of peace that I'd never known before. The road to this moment hadn't been easy, but it had been worth every step. I had learned the importance of boundaries, of valuing myself, and of standing up for what I deserved. I had learned that love wasn't about control or sacrifice. It was about respect, trust, and mutual growth. In the years that followed, the family dynamic continued to evolve. There were still struggles, but they no longer felt insurmountable. We were learning how to navigate the complexities of our relationships, how to set boundaries while still holding space for love. The family was changing, but in a way that felt healthier, more real. And though we may never fully escape the past, we had learned that healing wasn't about forgetting or erasing the hurt. It was about moving forward with a sense of self-worth and understanding. It was about embracing the truth, no matter how difficult, and using it as the foundation for building healthier relationships. As I looked back on everything that had happened, I realized that the hardest boundaries to set were the ones that ultimately led to the most healing. By finally standing up for myself, by demanding the respect I deserved, I had set a course for a future where love and respect were the cornerstones of every relationship. In the end, I had learned that my worth wasn't determined by how others saw me. It was determined by how I saw myself, and by the courage I had to demand better from myself and those I loved.